Hello, guys and gals. Me, Mutahar, and ladies and gentlemen, I'll be real with you, man. Like, people have things they root for, they vote for, they go out of their way to experience, whether it be a sports team, whether it be anything. For me, I always root against Apple. Okay, I think they're probably one of the most annoying tech firms to deal with. As I say that, while I actually do use an iPhone, and to be real with you, I don't use this iPhone because I'm a particular lover of Apple. I use this iPhone because you ever just like live in North America and there's people in your family, there's people in your friend circle, there's people in your professional sphere that literally just use iPhones. You can't message them on an Android because they're always in their group chats, they're always in their blue bubbles, they're always in their Apple like ecosystem, to the point where even if you try to like tell somebody, hey man, there's a lot of good Android stuff you can switch to, it's always, nope, it's too confusing. I don't know if I can do that, Muda. It's crazy. It's kind of wild. Like, people will go to Apple for like a new iPhone every goddamn year. God forbid you're the psychopath that buys a new iPhone every single year. But for a phone that, if you go to their most top-end line, like the Pro Max over here, the Prolapse, if you will, well, that's priced at $1,200 just starting. Okay, just starting, by the way. I wish you could really do whatever the hell it is that you wanted with your phone, right? Don't you think that if you're spending like, that much money on a phone, you should be allowed to install whatever you want on it, okay? I think for that price, the phone better suck my cock, okay? Simple as that. Now, it's one of the reasons why I've always appreciated these Android devices, because you can buy all types of Android phones, You can buy the really cheap stuff, the stuff that you can stick up your butt when you go to prison, okay, I've seen those. And you can buy all the way to these cool foldable phones. I think this stuff is really cool. I think it's really awesome that I can have a phone where I can have a little screen at the front, okay, like boom, fire that up, and then just open it up and do a super big screen, okay? I think that's really cool tech. Don't know why Apple hasn't done that, all right? And honestly, for the price tags that I'm seeing over here, this ain't that much more expensive. That's crazy, isn't it? But you know what? You know what I love about this phone over the iPhone a lot is that if I want to install any application that I want, I don't have to let Daddy Samsung or anybody who's making my phone be the ultimate decider. There's a reason I call Apple iPhones like the Fisher Price of cell phones, is because it really is the Fisher Price of a cell phone, right? Like, when you buy this, it's basically Apple that gets to decide what you really do with your phone, okay? What you really do with the hardware that you buy. Now, I think a great analog and an apt comparison is like, imagine if you went out to the store and you bought a laptop. Like, let's say you buy, like, I don't know, that new Lenovo laptop or whatever. Whether it be a MacBook, whether it be a PC, whether it be a Linux laptop, it doesn't matter. Imagine if the manufacturer of the laptop was like, we get to decide, buddy, what you install on your laptop. The operating system, the fucking programs, the drivers. We get to decide what your laptop does and what it interfaces with, okay? And that's simple as that. And if you don't like it, go somewhere else. Well, that's precisely what you can do with an iPhone. Unfortunately, if you're in a world like mine where family, friends, and your professional ecosystem at work loves those blue bubbles and iMessages and Apple's ecosystem, trying to convince people to switch is insane. Even though I would say trying to figure out how to use an Android phone after using an iPhone is actually dramatically easy, okay? It's not like this is some arcane piece of technology that requires you to fucking go to university and figure out how to use. I've seen babies figure out how to use a fucking Android phone, okay? So don't tell me as a grown fucking adult you can't make the switch and understand. But before I get really mad, really insane about this, the catalyst for today's video is actually a war that I've been watching going on between Apple and ironically Epic Games, okay? So, believe it or not, 2 weeks ago, I made a video where I looked at a court case between Apple and Epic, and it actually really ended in a dramatic loss for Apple. So for anybody that doesn't know, years ago, Fortnite decided to implement a new form of payment scheme where they were going to basically bypass Apple's 30% tax on microtransactions. So you, the user, could just pay, uninflated taxes, uninflated payments on like V-Bucks, right? So Apple wasn't too kind about it. They liked that 30%. It was important for them, to the point where they just removed Fortnite from the App Store. So for a lot of people that play Fortnite, for a lot of people that were enjoyers of Fortnite on their iPhones, all of a sudden, you just couldn't play. You were not allowed to install an application on your product that you paid for, all because Apple said, nope, we just don't like the cut of their jib, they're out. Now, I think that's disgusting. I think it's wrong. And ultimately, after years of a lawsuit, Apple lost. Epic Games and their lawyers, and Apple's executives, turned out Apple was actually kind of trying to be a little deceitful to the court. They were kind of lying. They actually lied in the courts. And the courts did not like it. Apple thought that they could present something to the courts that was, something that they could pull the wool over their eyes, not knowing that the courts in America could do the same experimentation, come to the same fucking conclusions, that Apple is mostly full of shit, and basically just completely trashed them in a court. Now, because of that court ruling 2 weeks ago, everyone was wondering, whoa, so we're just going to get Fortnite back on a phone? Now, this is beyond Fortnite. This is beyond anything. This is the ability for you, the user, to have access to software on a device that you paid for without basically being told by your internet parents, in this case Apple, what you can and cannot do on your device. And I think that is really important, okay? And I think the important part about this is if this can happen to Apple, I want to see this happen to things like PlayStation, to things like Xbox, to things like Nintendo, to really any device, right? One of the gotchas that people do for me when it comes to like physical and digital games, like I buy a lot of these physical games and I love them, but Muda, you play on the Steam Deck and Steam and PC where everything's digital. That's true, but remember, PCs allow you to install multiple different storefronts, okay? You can choose to go to multiple stores. You don't have to use Steam at all if you're on PC. You can go to Epic, you can go to GOG, you can go to really anything. And it's because of the amount of competition that you can engage with. Everyone's on their toes, right? Let's say a video game is $20 on the Epic Game Store, right? Versus $60 on the Steam storefront. Now, unless you absolutely hate Epic with a fucking passion inside your body, you're probably going to just say, oh, I'll install the Epic storefront and just download the game from there. Now, that keeps all the other companies on their toes. They might have to price down, they might have to price accordingly, but you get what I'm saying, right? Whereas when you're on an iPhone or a PlayStation or an Xbox or a Nintendo device, there is just one place for you to download and purchase your stuff from. So effectively, all the sales, all the means of distribution are controlled by one person and their rule set, okay? So if you lose access to that control, if you lose access to that distribution, you're also losing access to the ability to install applications and all the functionality to a device that you paid for. These are not just phones, these are entire computers that we're paying computer prices for. It's crazy to me that when you go to Europe, when you go to like the other side of the world, because of laws, Apple is forced to let you install Fortnite and all the other applications imaginable because of the law that tells Apple that they can't be the sole decider. But if you come to here, Canada, North America, or US, or Mexico, or really anything, anywhere other than the Europeans, Apple basically gets to be the ultimate decider. And I don't think that's okay at all. I don't think that's ever been okay, all right? And I have always been an advocate against it. It's one of the reasons why like these things like AltStore are one of the most used applications and services on my actual smartphone. This is the only real way for me to install side-loaded applications that are outside the App Store. And I don't even know if what I'm doing here is entirely legal. Honest to God, sometimes I feel that the way that this application is built and these loopholes are created, Apple might just even ban my account because they don't like what's going on here. And honestly, I don't agree with it. I don't understand why Apple is so fervently for it. But anyways, what's kind of wild over here is after Apple lost this case, surprisingly speaking, Fortnite on the iOS devices is still somehow not available. For some reason, according to whichever side, and there's a mixture of, constant information, you cannot access this game because apparently it's stuck in approval hell. So for anybody that doesn't know, when you make an application for the Apple product or, Android storefronts, you have to send them a copy of your app, the app gets checked, and then it gets approved through a system. Now this approval can take, a random amount of time. But I feel like when it comes to Fortnite, this has been such a goddamn L that Apple has had to have that they are apparently seeming to think they're above the law. They're beyond this legal requirement of bringing this application back, and they're doing everything they can to basically limit this fucking game from getting through. It's to the point where, like, the Streisand effect, it's a really important thing we talked about on this channel. You know, people who do not care about Fortnite whatsoever are probably more interested in playing this just to give a fuck you to Apple at this point. So thankfully, we actually have the Epic motion right over here in the court documents. And again, it's them saying, listen, on May 1st, they notified Apple that they were going to bring that Fortnite back. Okay, they were going to submit that for review. So on May 9th, they submit a build of Fortnite that complies with all of their guidelines, apparently according to Epic. And what they said, that Apple did not act on Epic's submission for a full 5 days, even though it generally approves 90% of this stuff within 24 hours. So I guess that's implying, like, you know, let's say you have a 5-day review period. The guys over at Apple were like, you know what, just to fuck with Tim Sweeney, okay? Tim Apple decides, yeah, just hold off, okay? Wait, make all the time go up, okay? Because I mean, the ball's in their court. But of course, what Apple says over here is Apple's decision to block Fortnite is a clear violation of the injunction. Apple pretends its denial is simply an exercise of its contractual right, recognized in this court's post-trial Rule 52 order. So here's the interesting part about this, right? Like, I actually want Apple to keep kicking and screaming, because the longer that Apple kicks and screams and the more money that's spent from Epic's lawyers and bringing this attention to the court again, I wonder if this goes beyond just, hey, Apple's, 30% cut got threatened, to like, wait, maybe we shouldn't just let one company control what people install on a device owned by millions upon millions of people internationally. And I think if you're like the biggest Apple simp in the world, you have to be siding with Epic just so that you have more options on the device you pay for. Remember, don't be a fanboy of a company. Apple in San Francisco could give a fuck what you think, okay? As long as they can infringe, as long as they can control what you do, that's all Apple gives a shit about, okay? Do not listen to anything they feed you about privacy, about your security, when in reality, this is just about control. Now, because of Apple losing their court case too, one other thing that they've been doing, which is really shady and shitty to me, is like when you're purchasing like applications on your device, and a lot of these applications beyond just Fortnite have taken advantage of the fact that you can sidestep Apple's shitty taxes and basically keep the lion's share of the money to yourself. Apple has now decided to put these like surgeon health warnings on your device and say, this app does not support the App Store's private and secure payment system. It uses external purchases. So again, it's another example of Apple trying to scare the shit out of, like, your grandmother from buying something on the storefront, when most financial purchases in today's day and age are very encrypted and very secure by definition. Apple doesn't do much more than anything to secure any of these payments, more so than any of these big tech applications. They're just sore that they are slowly but surely losing control of their own storefront to the freedoms that people have been tasting on, again, alternate platforms for years, right? So one of the biggest things about having this level of control over your device where nobody can choose to decide what they want to install is apparently to keep you safe, which is entirely bullshit, right? And it's one of the things that not just me, but even CEOs like Tim Sweeney have called out entirely. So for instance, if you actually go to the App Store, you'll find tons of scam software like Epic Survival Battle Royale 3D, which, by the way, okay, let's be completely honest, this is just aping Fortnite at this point, okay? So again, for Apple to say that, trust me, we're just making sure you're safe so you're not playing scam shit on your device, is complete bullshit, okay? Dare I say, bollocks, okay? If you look at some of the stores that exist, if you look at some of the games, you will literally find Fortnite app clones that are literally designed so every child can download this and possibly run some crypto miner in the background, or just be watching ads constantly feeding these people through ad networks, okay? That is all what these applications are about. That is literally all what this shit is about. Now, again, I don't know if there's necessarily lying back and forth, because to be honest, Epic Games and Apple are not the greatest friends imaginable, but I'm going to probably err more on the side of this being an Apple problem than just an Epic Games problem. Because honestly, it's like, at this point, an application as high profile as Fortnite should have been reviewed, should have been put through the system, and probably displayed for people to actually play. The fact that it's taking so long with no real like explanation from Apple as to like any rule busting shows that this is again a company deliberately trying to control what it is that you do on your device. Which I think ultimately, like, if you take away all of the goofy Fortnite versus Apple from this, it's really just control. I think if you're somebody that's an iPhone lover and Apple enjoyer, you probably should be on the side of Tim Sweeney. You probably should be on the side against Apple, deliberately controlling what you can and cannot do on your devices, okay? Honest to God, to end this video off, I think realistically speaking, Apple could probably have the greatest smartphone. Like, it would probably be just a million times more competitive with Android if they actually just allowed the same level of freedoms and controls that Android devices have allowed since the beginning to Apple devices, okay? It's crazy how, like, literally it feels like, you know, every other, like, iOS update that there's probably some feature aped from Android over to the Apple side, but never the features that I think really matter. The features that really cater to the power users, the features that allow you to purchase a smartphone for thousands of dollars and actually use it as an actual computer, as an actual standalone device, as a device where you have some level of control over. I don't know why Apple is so fucking horny to keep you in the same loop, but it is something that I feel should be addressed. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.